I was standing in my driveway on a Tuesday morning in Mesa, Arizona, when I realized that sometimes the smallest property decisions can trigger the biggest neighborhood wars. My name is Franklin Everett, and I had just bought my dream house 6 months ago in the Sunridge Hills subdivision. The property was perfect. A 3-bedroom ranch with a large backyard, mature landscaping, and best of all, a propane fuel tank that powered my entire home heating system, water heater, and the outdoor grill setup I had installed. The tank sat on the side of my property, easily accessible from the driveway for the delivery trucks that came every few months to refill it. Everything was going smoothly until that particular morning when I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. The letter was printed on official HOA letterhead, complete with the Sunridge Hills logo, a pretentious little sun rising over cartoon hills. I pulled it off and started reading. The notice stated that my fuel tank was creating an eyesore and violated Section 7.3 of the HOA covenants regarding exterior aesthetics. I had to remedy the situation within 30 days or face daily fines of $100. The letter was signed by Barbara Anderson, the HOA president, and included her personal phone number with a note that she would be happy to discuss the matter. I stood there holding the paper, completely baffled. The fuel tank had been there when I bought the house. The previous owners had lived there for 15 years without any issues. The tank was white, clean, and tucked against the side of the house where it was barely visible from the street. You had to actually walk into my driveway and look directly at that corner to even see it. I went inside and pulled out my closing documents, finding the HOA covenants and restrictions. I spent the next hour reading through the dense legal language, searching for Section 7.3. When I found it, I discovered it mentioned that all exterior fixtures and installations must maintain the aesthetic character of the neighborhood. It was vague enough to be interpreted 1,000 different ways. The smart thing to do was call Barbara Anderson and have a reasonable conversation. I dialed the number and she picked up on the second ring. "This is Barbara," she answered, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Hi, Barbara. This is Franklin Everett from 2847 Desert View Drive. I received a violation notice this morning about my propane tank." "Oh yes, Mr. Everett. I am glad you called so promptly. That tank is quite unsightly and several neighbors have complained." "Several neighbors?" I asked. "The tank is barely visible from the street, which neighbors complained." "I am not at liberty to disclose that information," she said. However, the complaints were valid and the board voted unanimously to issue the violation. "The tank has been there for over 15 years, I explained. "It was here when I bought the property. If it violates the covenants, why was it approved originally?" Barbara's tone became frosty. "Previous board administrations may have been lax in enforcement. Under my leadership, we are ensuring all properties meet our community standards. You have 30 days to remove or adequately screen the tank." "Screen it how?" I asked. "That is your responsibility to determine, Mr. Everett. Perhaps you could relocate it to a less visible area or install professional landscaping to block it from view. Some homeowners have successfully used decorative screening panels." "The tank needs to stay where it is for delivery truck access," I said. "The propane company needs to be able to pull their truck into my driveway and run the hose directly to the tank. If I move it or block it completely, I cannot get propane deliveries." "Then you will need to find a creative solution," Barbara said. "The violation stands. Good day, Mr. Everett." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling the first stirrings of real anger. This was ridiculous. The tank was essential infrastructure for my home. I could not just remove it or move it without spending thousands of dollars on replumbing and reconfiguring my entire heating system. Over the next few days, I did some research. I called my propane company, Southwest Gas Supply, and explained the situation to their customer service representative. He told me that relocating a tank of that size would cost between $8,000 and $12,000, not including the replumbing work inside the house. The tank had to remain accessible from the driveway, or they could not service it safely. I also drove around the neighborhood, really looking at other properties. What I discovered made me even angrier. 3 other houses in Sunridge Hills had visible propane tanks. 2 had air conditioning units that were more visible than my tank. One property had a garden shed that was painted bright blue and sat right at the front corner of their yard. Several houses had boats or RVs parked in driveways or side yards. My fuel tank was easily the least offensive thing visible in the entire subdivision. I took photographs of everything and compiled them into a folder. Then I drafted a formal response to the HOA, explaining that my tank was necessary infrastructure, that it predated my ownership, that moving it was prohibitively expensive, and that other similar items existed throughout the neighborhood without violation notices. I included the photographs as evidence of selective enforcement. I mailed the response with delivery confirmation and waited. 2 weeks passed without any reply. Then, on a Saturday morning, I found another notice on my door. This one informed me that my appeal had been denied and that I now had 16 days remaining to remedy the violation. There was also a new complaint attached. Apparently, my mailbox needed repainting. My mailbox was standard black metal, identical to every other mailbox on my street. I had just noticed that the post was showing some weathering, but it was hardly a crisis. This felt personal now. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which according to the notice board at the neighborhood entrance was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. I marked my calendar and spent the weekend preparing my case. Tuesday evening arrived, and I drove to the clubhouse, a small building near the subdivision entrance that housed a meeting room, a tiny gym, and a pool area. I walked in at 6:55 and found about a dozen other homeowners already seated in folding chairs facing a long table where the board members sat. Barbara Anderson was impossible to miss. She was a woman in her early 50s with short blonde hair styled in that particular suburban mom cut that said she needed to speak to the manager of everything. She wore a white blazer over a floral blouse and had reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She was shuffling papers and talking in low tones to the other board members. I took a seat in the back row and waited. At exactly 7, Barbara called the meeting to order by tapping a small gavel on the table. She introduced herself and the other board members. Thomas, the vice president, a nervous-looking man in his 60s. Patricia, the treasurer, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and 2 other members whose names I immediately forgot. The meeting began with standard business items: approval of the previous meeting minutes, a financial report, discussion about the pool maintenance contract. I sat through 40 minutes of the most boring administrative details imaginable. Finally, Barbara asked if there was any new business or homeowner concerns. I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Everett," Barbara said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You are here about your violation notice, I presume." "Yes, I am," I said, standing up. "I want to formally contest the violation regarding my propane fuel tank." "The board has already reviewed and denied your appeal," Barbara said. "I understand, but I do not think the original violation is valid," I said. The tank is necessary infrastructure. It has been there for 15 years without issue. Moving it would cost over $10,000, and there is no reasonable alternative location that would maintain delivery access. Mr. Everett, we have been over this, Barbara said. The tank is an eyesore. Multiple neighbors have complained. Which neighbors? I asked. And if you are enforcing aesthetic standards, why are there 3 other visible propane tanks in the neighborhood? Why are there boats parked in driveways? Why is there a bright blue shed on Cactus Drive? Murmurs went through the small crowd. A few people turned to look at each other. Barbara's face flushed slightly. Those matters are being addressed separately, she said. Are they? I asked. Because I have not seen violation notices on any of those properties. This seems like selective enforcement. Mr. Everett, you are out of order, Barbara said, her voice rising. The board has made its decision. If you refuse to comply, you will face daily fines as outlined in the covenants. I am not refusing to comply, I said. I am asking for a reasonable accommodation. What if I install screening that maintains access for delivery trucks? That would need to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee, Barbara said. Fine. Who do I submit plans to? I chair that committee, Barbara said with what could only be described as a satisfied expression. Submit your proposal in writing with detailed drawings and photographs of the proposed materials. The committee meets once a month. When is the next meeting? I asked. We just had one last week, Barbara said. The next meeting is in 4 weeks, but my deadline is in 16 days, I said. Then I suggest you work quickly, Mr. Everett. Meeting adjourned. She banged the gavel and the board members started gathering their papers. I stood there feeling like I had just been backed into a corner. The whole thing was designed to make compliance impossible. The timeline did not allow for committee approval, which meant I would start accruing fines no matter what I did. As people filed out, an older man approached me. He was tall and lean with white hair and wore a golf shirt and khakis. That was brutal, he said quietly. I am Robert, by the way. I live on Mesa Ridge Court, Franklin, I said, shaking his hand. Do you know what Barbara's deal is? She has been president for 2 years, Robert said. She runs the board like her personal fiefdom. 3 families have already moved out because of her enforcement campaigns. She targets people she does not like and makes their lives miserable until they comply or leave. Why do not people vote her out? I asked. Most homeowners do not bother voting, Robert said. She stacks the board with her friends. The annual elections are a formality. This is insane, I said. Welcome to Sunridge Hills, Robert said with a tired smile. My advice, give her what she wants or lawyer up. Those are your only options. I thanked him and walked out to my truck, my mind racing. I was not the type to roll over when someone pushed me around, but I also did not have unlimited money for legal fees. I needed a solution that would satisfy the HOA's screening requirement while maintaining access to my tank. That night, I sat at my kitchen table sketching ideas. The tank was about 4 feet tall and 8 feet long, sitting on a concrete pad against the side of my house. The propane truck needed to be able to pull into my driveway and extend a hose about 20 feet to reach the tank inlet. Any screening would need to be removable, or at least have an opening large enough for the delivery work. I remembered Barbara's comment about decorative screening panels. I started researching online and found dozens of options: lattice panels, metal cutout designs, wooden slat screens. Most were designed for hiding trash cans or air conditioning units. Then, I found something interesting: decorative metal fence panels designed to look like ornamental ironwork. They came in various patterns, some quite elaborate, and were freestanding with posts that sunk into the ground. The panels were spaced to allow airflow while blocking direct view of whatever was behind them. I spent the next few days measuring, planning, and pricing materials. I decided on a design that would use 5 decorative metal panels arranged in a semicircle around the tank, leaving a 6-foot opening facing the driveway for access. The panels I chose had an attractive scrollwork design that would definitely qualify as decorative. Each panel was 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, painted black to match my house trim. The total cost was around $1,500 for materials, which was a lot better than $10,000 to move the tank. I could install it myself over a weekend. I took detailed measurements, drew up plans on my computer, and took photographs of the panels from the manufacturer website. Then I wrote a formal proposal to the Architectural Review Committee, explaining that the decorative fence would screen the fuel tank while maintaining necessary access for deliveries. I included everything Barbara could possibly want: plans, dimensions, material specifications, color samples, and installation timeline. I mailed the proposal with delivery confirmation, then immediately ordered the materials. They would arrive in 10 days. I figured even if the committee denied my proposal, having the fence installed would show good faith effort at compliance. A week later, I received a response from the Architectural Review Committee. The letter was 3 paragraphs of dense, bureaucratic language that essentially said, "We need more information before we can approve this. Please submit additional photographs showing exactly how the fence would look from every angle, including from the street, from neighboring properties, and from inside your yard. Also provide material samples for in-person inspection." The letter was signed by Barbara Anderson, Architectural Review Committee Chair. I read it twice, feeling my blood pressure rising. This was pure stalling. She wanted me to accrue fines while jumping through impossible hoops. Getting photographs from neighboring properties would require asking neighbors for permission to enter their yards. Material samples would mean ordering sample pieces that would take weeks to arrive. My violation deadline was now 5 days away. I made a decision. I was going to install the fence immediately, exactly as I had proposed. If Barbara wanted to fine me for an unapproved structure, that would be a different violation, and I could argue that I had acted in good faith to address the original tank complaint. My fence panels arrived on Thursday morning. I spent Friday and Saturday installing them, working from dawn until dark both days. The installation was more work than I had anticipated. Each panel needed 2 posts sunk 3 feet into the ground in concrete. The desert soil was hard and rocky, and I had to rent an auger to drill the holes. By Saturday evening, the fence was complete. It looked fantastic. The black scrollwork panels formed an elegant screen around the fuel tank, completely hiding it from street view while leaving the driveway side open for access. The metalwork caught the setting sun and cast interesting shadow patterns. If anything, the fence improved my property's appearance. I took photographs from every conceivable angle and emailed them to the HOA administrative email address, with a note that the screening was now installed per my submitted proposal. Sunday, I got a response. It was not from Barbara, but from the HOA management company, a firm called Desert Community Management. The email informed me that I had installed an unapproved structure and was now in violation of Section 4.7 of the covenants regarding architectural modifications. I had 14 days to remove the fence or face fines of $100 per day. I also still had the original violation for the visible fuel tank, since the fence had not been approved. I was potentially facing $200 per day in fines for trying to fix a problem. That Sunday afternoon, I called an attorney. I found a firm in Phoenix called Henderson and Associates that specialized in HOA disputes. I spoke with a lawyer named Jennifer Henderson who listened to my entire story without interrupting. "How much in fines are you facing?" she asked when I finished. "If they enforce both violations, $200 per day," I said. "Okay, that is substantial," Jennifer said. "Here is what is going to happen. They will let the fines accumulate for 60 to 90 days. Then they will send you a demand letter for the full amount, probably $15,000 to $20,000. If you do not pay, they will put a lien on your property and eventually force a sale to recover the fines." "They can do that?" I asked. "Unfortunately, yes. Arizona HOA law gives them significant power. However, you have a strong case for selective enforcement and for acting in good faith to remedy a violation. The problem is that fighting this will cost you several $1,000s in legal fees. What do you recommend?" I asked. "Let me send them a letter," Jennifer said. "Sometimes a lawyer getting involved makes HOAs back down, especially if they know their position is weak. My retainer is $2,000, and that covers initial correspondence and negotiation. If this goes to litigation, costs go up significantly." I thought about my savings account. $2,000 was manageable barely. "Let's do it," I said. Jennifer drafted a letter and sent it to the HOA the next day. The letter laid out my case. The tank was pre-existing infrastructure. Other similar items existed in the neighborhood without violations. I had acted in good faith to address the complaint. The fence actually improved the property aesthetics, and the dual violations for the same issue constituted improper enforcement. The letter demanded that both violations be withdrawn immediately. I did not hear anything for a week. Then, I received a certified letter from Desert Community Management. The letter stated that both violations remained in effect. Fines were now officially accruing at $200 per day, as of the original deadline date, which meant I already owed $2,800. The letter also informed me that the matter was being turned over to the HOA's attorney and that all further communication should go through legal channels. Jennifer called me after receiving a copy of the letter. "They are playing hardball," she said. "This is going to litigation. I need to be honest with you, Franklin. You are looking at probably $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees if we take this all the way through. There is also no guarantee we win." "What are my options?" I asked. 1. You pay the fines and remove the fence, probably total around $5,000 at this point, and figure out some other solution for the tank. 2. You keep fighting and potentially spend $15,000 in legal fees. 3. You sell the house and move. "Those all sound terrible," I said. "HOA disputes usually are," Jennifer said sympathetically. "The system is designed to favor the association. They have the authority and they know most homeowners cannot afford to fight." I thought about it for a long moment. I am not moving, and I am not taking down the fence. It looks good, it solves the problem, and I am not letting Barbara Anderson bully me off my own property. "Okay," Jennifer said. "Then we fight. I will file a response and we will request a hearing with the board. If that does not work, we will go to court." Over the next month, Jennifer exchanged correspondence with the HOA's attorney, a man named Richard Thornton who specialized in HOA law. Every letter was dense with legal citations and threats. The HOA maintained that I was in violation on 2 counts and owed fines that were now over $8,000. Jennifer filed for a hearing before the HOA board, which was granted for a Tuesday evening in August. The Arizona heat was brutal that month, regularly hitting 115 degrees. I showed up to the clubhouse in a button-down shirt and slacks, sweating through my clothes by the time I reached the air-conditioned building. The hearing was not like the regular board meeting. This time, the board sat on one side of the room and I sat on the other with Jennifer beside me. Barbara Anderson presided, looking triumphant. She had clearly been waiting for this. Jennifer presented our case methodically. She showed photographs of other properties with visible tanks, boats, and RVs. She showed the propane company's letter explaining why the tank location was necessary. She showed photographs of the decorative fence from multiple angles, demonstrating that it improved rather than detracted from the property's appearance. She cited specific Arizona statutes regarding reasonable accommodation for necessary infrastructure. Barbara and the other board members sat stone-faced through the entire presentation. When Jennifer finished, Barbara spoke. "The board appreciates your thorough presentation," she said. "However, the facts remain unchanged. Mr. Everett installed an unapproved structure. He failed to comply with the architectural review process. Other properties in the neighborhood are not relevant to this case. Each violation is evaluated independently." "But my client attempted to comply," Jennifer said. "He submitted a proposal that was delayed by unnecessary requests for additional information. The timeline made approval impossible before the violation deadline." "That is not the board's problem," Barbara said. "Mr. Everett should have requested an extension." "He was not informed that was an option," Jennifer said. "Ignorance is not an excuse," Barbara shot back. The hearing went in circles for another 30 minutes. Finally, the board voted. 4 votes to uphold both violations, 0 votes to dismiss. Barbara looked directly at me as she announced the decision. "Mr. Everett, you now owe $9,200 in fines. If you remove the fence and relocate the fuel tank within 30 days, we will reduce the fines by half. Otherwise, the full amount is due immediately and a lien will be placed on your property." We left the clubhouse and I felt completely defeated. "What now?" I asked Jennifer. "Now we file a lawsuit," she said. "We take this to civil court and let a judge decide. But Franklin, I need to be clear. This will cost you at least another $8,000, probably more, and there is no guarantee we win." I drove home feeling sick to my stomach. I had maybe $12,000 in savings. This fight was going to drain everything I had and I could still lose. But something about the way Barbara had looked at me during that hearing, so smug and self-satisfied, made me furious. This was not really about the fuel tank anymore. This was about whether someone like her could abuse power without consequences. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking through every angle. Around 2 in the morning, an idea hit me. I got up and opened my laptop, searching through the HOA covenants and restrictions again, reading every section carefully. I found something interesting in section 12.4. It dealt with board member conduct and potential conflicts of interest. The section stated that board members must recuse themselves from any vote where they had a personal financial interest in the outcome. I started digging into public records. Arizona requires HOAs to maintain certain transparency in their finances. I submitted a formal request to Desert Community Management for copies of all vendor contracts and board member disclosure forms for the past 2 years. They had to provide the documents within 10 business days according to state law. When the packet arrived, I spent an entire evening going through every page, and that is when I found it. The HOA had a contract with a landscaping company called Desert Verde Landscaping for ongoing maintenance of common areas. The contract was worth about $40,000 per year. According to the incorporation records I found online, Desert Verde Landscaping was owned by Barbara Anderson and her husband, Michael Anderson. Barbara had voted on her own company's contract renewal. She had also recommended increases in the landscaping budget during budget meetings, which directly benefited her financially. None of this was disclosed in any of the board meeting minutes. I called Jennifer immediately the next morning and told her what I had found. "That is a serious conflict of interest," Jennifer said. "If she voted on items that directly benefited her financially without disclosure, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. It could potentially invalidate decisions she participated in." "Including my violations?" I asked. "Possibly," Jennifer said. "This changes things. Let me do some more research, but this could be our leverage to get them to back down." Jennifer drafted a new letter, this time much more aggressive. The letter outlined the conflict of interest issue and noted that Barbara's participation in my violation hearings could be challenged given her pattern of undisclosed financial self-dealing. The letter suggested that the HOA might want to reconsider its position before the matter became more public. We also filed the lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court, alleging improper enforcement, selective application of covenants, and conflicts of interest in board governance. The filing became a matter of public record. 2 days later, I got a call from Thomas, the vice president of the HOA board. His voice was nervous and quiet. "Mr. Everett, I would like to discuss a potential resolution," he said. "I have been talking with some other board members and we think there might be a way to work this out." "I am listening," I said. "What if we approved your fence retroactively and dismissed the violations? You would not owe any fines and you could keep the screening as installed." "What about Barbara?" I asked. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Barbara has agreed to step down as president. She will remain on the board but will recuse herself from future decisions regarding your property." "That is not enough," I said. "I have evidence that she has been voting on contracts that benefit her business without disclosure. That needs to be addressed." Another long pause. "What do you want, Mr. Everett?" "I want Barbara off the board entirely. I want an audit of all HOA contracts to ensure no other conflicts of interest exist. I want all my legal fees reimbursed. And I want a formal policy change that prevents this kind of selective enforcement in the future." "That is quite a lot," Thomas said. "The alternative is I make the conflict of interest issue very public," I said. "I will file complaints with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. I will file a separate lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. I will contact every homeowner in this subdivision and let them know their HOA president has been funneling association money to her own business. Your choice." Thomas said he would talk to the other board members and call me back. 3 days later, I received a formal offer. Barbara would resign from the board immediately. An independent audit would be conducted of all HOA vendor contracts. The HOA would reimburse me $5,000 toward legal fees. Both violations would be dismissed, and the fence would be retroactively approved. The board would also implement new policies requiring disclosure of any board member business relationships with HOA vendors. Jennifer reviewed the offer and advised me that it was probably the best I would get without a long court battle. I accepted. Barbara resigned at the next board meeting, which I attended. She did not look at me once during the entire meeting. Her letter of resignation cited personal reasons and thanked the board for their support during her tenure. The room was packed with homeowners who had clearly heard rumors about what was happening. When the resignation was accepted, there was actually a small round of applause. The audit was completed 6 weeks later. It found that Desert Verde Landscaping had been paid $120,000 over 3 years, and that the contract rates were approximately 30% higher than comparable services. The HOA terminated the contract and rebid the landscaping work. The new company charged significantly less for better service. Barbara and her husband were also forced to repay $60,000 to the HOA for excessive charges, though they negotiated a payment plan to avoid criminal charges. The HOA could have pursued criminal fraud charges, but the board decided that civil restitution was sufficient punishment. I got my $5,000 reimbursement check in September, which covered about half of what I had spent on legal fees. My decorative fence remained in place, and I never heard another word about my fuel tank. The propane delivery truck came every few months without any issues. The following February, the HOA held its annual elections. I ran for a board position, figuring that the best way to prevent future problems was to be involved. I was elected along with Robert, the older man who had approached me after that first meeting, and two other homeowners who were equally tired of the old board's attitude. Our first order of business was revising the covenant enforcement policies. We implemented clear standards for what constituted a violation, required photographs and specific citations for any violation notice, and created an appeal process that actually gave homeowners time to respond. We also required that any board member with a potential conflict of interest on any vote must disclose it and recuse themselves. Thomas remained as president, and he actually turned out to be reasonable once Barbara was gone. He admitted that he had gone along with her enforcement campaigns because it was easier than fighting her, but he had never been comfortable with how she targeted certain homeowners. The subdivision became a much more pleasant place to live. The pool area got upgraded with new furniture and better landscaping. The common areas actually looked nicer with the new landscaping company. Several homeowners who had been considering moving decided to stay. As for Barbara, I saw her occasionally around Mesa, usually at the grocery store or gas station. She never acknowledged me. According to neighborhood gossip, she and her husband had to sell their landscaping business to pay back the HOA settlement. She got a job managing a retail store in Phoenix. Their house in Sunridge Hills went on the market about a year after everything went down, and they moved to a different subdivision across town. My decorative fence still stands, looking as good as the day I installed it. The black scrollwork catches the Arizona sun in the late afternoon, casting intricate shadows across my driveway. My propane tank sits hidden behind it, completely functional and properly accessible for deliveries. The fence has become something of a conversation piece in the neighborhood. Several other homeowners have installed similar decorative screening for their air conditioning units and utility areas. Sometimes when I am pulling into my driveway after work, I look at that fence and remember the months of stress and fighting that went into it. Part of me wishes I had just moved the tank or taken down the fence and avoided all the conflict. But the larger part of me is glad I stood my ground. Barbara Anderson was abusing her position as HOA president, and if I had not pushed back, she would have continued targeting other homeowners. The whole experience taught me something important about community living and governance. HOAs are supposed to maintain property values and create pleasant neighborhoods, but they are only as good as the people running them. When someone like Barbara gets into power and uses it for personal benefit or petty tyranny, the whole system breaks down. It takes courage to stand up to that kind of abuse, and it definitely takes money, which is unfair to homeowners who cannot afford lengthy legal battles. I also learned that most HOA problems stem from lack of homeowner engagement. Barbara was able to dominate the board because most people did not vote, did not attend meetings, and did not pay attention to what the board was doing. When homeowners actually get involved and hold board members accountable, things improve dramatically. These days, our board meetings regularly have 20 to 30 homeowners in attendance. People actually read the meeting minutes and financial reports. When we vote on vendor contracts or major decisions, homeowners ask questions and expect detailed answers. The board knows they are being watched, and that accountability makes everyone behave better. My fuel tank continues to power my home heating system, water heater, and outdoor grill without any issues. The propane company has never had a problem accessing it for deliveries. The decorative fence requires minimal maintenance, just occasional cleaning to remove dust, and an inspection every year or so to make sure the posts remain secure. I have been asked a few times if I would ever want to be HOA president. I always decline. I am happy serving as a regular board member, showing up to meetings, voting on issues, and helping maintain reasonable policies. I have no desire for the headaches that come with running the whole show. Thomas does a fine job as president, and he is welcome to keep the position as long as he wants it. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize that my little fence became a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. It represents the principle that homeowners have rights, that necessary infrastructure should not be subject to arbitrary aesthetic rules, and that people in positions of authority need to be held accountable for their actions. The whole situation could have been avoided if Barbara had simply been reasonable from the start. If she had approached me as a neighbor rather than an enforcer, we could have worked out a screening solution without any conflict. But she chose to use her power as a weapon, and that decision ultimately cost her the position, her business, and her reputation in the community. I have kept all the documentation from the dispute in a folder in my home office. Every violation notice, every letter from attorneys, every photograph, every email. Sometimes when new homeowners move into the subdivision, they reach out to me after hearing stories about the HOA fight. I share my experience and my documentation, and I encourage them to get involved in the HOA from the start, rather than waiting until there is a problem. The decorative fence cost me $1,500 in materials and about 20 hours of labor to install. It ended up costing me another $10,000 in legal fees and countless hours of stress and fighting. But it also resulted in removing a corrupt board president, recovering $60,000 for the HOA, implementing better governance policies, and creating a more engaged homeowner community. In that sense, it was worth every penny and every hour. My property value has increased by about 12% since I bought the house, which is slightly above average for the Mesa area. The improvements we made to the common areas and the better management of HOA finances have definitely contributed to that increase. Several real estate agents have told me that Sunridge Hills now has a positive reputation compared to some other HOA communities in the area, which helps with property values and sales. I still have the original violation notice framed in my garage, hanging on the wall near my workbench. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the smallest provocations can lead to the biggest changes. That bright orange paper threatening me with fines for a fuel tank ultimately transformed our entire community. Every few months, I get contacted by homeowners in other subdivisions who are dealing with their own HOA disputes. They find me through online forums or through word of mouth, and they want advice on how to fight back against unreasonable enforcement. I always tell them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights under state law, get legal help early if you can afford it, look for conflicts of interest or procedural violations, and do not be afraid to stand your ground if you are in the right. Not every HOA fight is winnable. Sometimes the covenants really do give the board legitimate authority to enforce rules, even if those rules seem unreasonable. Sometimes the cost of fighting exceeds any possible benefit. But in cases like mine, where there was clear selective enforcement, conflicts of interest and abuse of power, it is worth fighting back. The Arizona sun beats down on my decorative fence every day, heating the black metal to temperatures that would burn your hand if you touched it during summer afternoons. But the fence stands strong, doing exactly what it was designed to do, screening my fuel tank while maintaining access for deliveries. It has survived monsoon storms, intense heat, and the occasional dust devil that whips through the neighborhood. I am proud of that fence. Not because it is particularly beautiful or impressive, but because of what it represents. It represents standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult and expensive. It represents the principle that homeowners deserve to be treated fairly, and that people in authority need to be held accountable. It represents the idea that sometimes you have to fight back against bullies, even when the fight seems unwinnable. My story spread throughout the Mesa area HOA community. I have been invited to speak at a couple of homeowner meetings in other subdivisions about HOA governance and homeowner rights. I am not an expert or a lawyer, just a guy who had to learn the hard way how the system works. But apparently my experience resonates with a lot of people who feel powerless against their own HOA boards. The most rewarding part of the whole experience has been seeing the positive changes in Sunridge Hills. Our community genuinely feels like a community now, rather than a dictatorship. People know their board members and feel comfortable approaching us with concerns. We handle disputes through conversation and compromise rather than automatic violation notices. Property values are up, common areas are well maintained, and neighbors actually seem to like living here. That Tuesday morning when I found the first violation notice on my door feels like a lifetime ago, even though it has only been a few years. I was just a guy who bought a house with a propane tank, trying to live my life without drama. Barbara Anderson turned it into a war, and she lost. The decorative fence that resolved the whole conflict still stands as a testament to the power of standing your ground when you know you are right. I have no regrets about how I handled the situation. Yes, it cost me money and time and stress. Yes, there were moments when I wanted to just give up and either pay the fines or sell the house. But I am glad I fought back. I am glad I exposed the corruption. I am glad I helped create a better community for everyone who lives here. My fuel tank continues to do its job, safely and efficiently providing propane for my home. The decorative fence continues to screen it from view while allowing access for deliveries. The HOA board continues to function with proper oversight and accountability. And I continue to live in my dream house in Mesa, Arizona, enjoying the desert sunshine and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the good guys actually do win. The whole experience taught me that home ownership is about more than just maintaining your property and paying your mortgage. It is also about being engaged in your community, standing up for your rights, and holding those in authority accountable for their actions. HOAs can be a force for good when they are run properly by people who genuinely care about the community. But they can also become instruments of petty tyranny when the wrong people get control. I hope my story helps other homeowners who find themselves in similar situations. You do not have to be a lawyer or an expert to fight back against HOA overreach. You just need to be willing to do the research, document everything, stand firm in your convictions, and not back down when you know you are right. Sometimes that is enough to create real change.